no research is ever entirely linear, but I think within creative practice, it can become very, very complex in terms of which of those different stages of the process are you in. If it's an artifact, the artifact is embodying the process. So actually we can't separate those two. And actually, if you're doing something maybe that's socially engaged or that's working with a community group, that could be both a research engagement to have learning from and investigation through. It can also at the same time be about dissemination. It can be about all of those things. And I think that complexity, if people are used to very linear thinking, just needs a bit more. It's about being open to breaking that down and actually challenging what does it look like, and does it have to look like that one thing? I think that's the main thing.
Welcome to What the Ref, our attempt at demystifying the nation's favourite research excellence framework exercise. I'm Ola.
I'm Gemma.
And I'm Simon.
So today we've got some interesting content for you. We've got an interview, which we're going to dive into later. But first of all, has anything interesting been happening in the press lately?
Well, I guess we can start with talking the murder of research professional. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
So research professional, as people would know, has been eaten up by Elsevier a couple of years ago, and they have decided, Elsevier, that research professional, which has been an incredible supporter of all research, news, politics, etc., in UK and in Europe, has been labelled not part of core business and strategic objectives and all that manager talk, and decided that they will close it in December. I think it's a horrendous decision by Elsevier. I think it's going to be a huge loss for the sector. And I think that, it's been a great supporter of myself personally, but also, Hidden Ref and us as well. And I think their absence is going to be felt. I mean, there are other providers, but none that specifically focus on giving research a voice and research politics a voice. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I mean, when I read that news, I instantly thought that is going to be bad for the sector, because it's the place you go when you want a view on research policy related stuff that maybe is a bit more specific and focused on research rather than the broader sort of news you get in other publications. As you said, there are other publications that care about the sector, but not that are just so laser focused on research. So yeah, what do we research policy nerds do? Where are we going to go and do our reading? There is, there's Wonky obviously, and there's Times Higher and places like that, but they have that broader remit. So yeah, it will be a big loss.
Can I just say, though, for a company that is making a 34% profit year on, year out, to say that something that is so important to the research sector, which is exactly the sector that they milk money from, is a horrendous decision. It really is. I think it is poor taste, completely lacking in foresight and vision. And it doesn't exactly help us think Elsevier is a partner or a stakeholder in the research process. They really are cementing themselves as, the demon of research.
Well, let's hope someone will pick that up and they'll fill the void, and the gap will be felt by everybody who's in this business. So, let's hope maybe some of our stakeholders.
Yeah, but let's get back into this, shall we? We're talking about something as important and prominent and central as research professional requires funding. And, that funding needs to come from somewhere. It's either going to come from the good, some big business like Elsevier, which has just said that kind of business is not our core objective, so screw it, basically. Or it's going to have to come from the research sector itself, which is already milk for time. It's going to come out of the people who put their time and their effort and their passion in for free in order to serve a research community. Again, that is the job of a research stakeholder, not of the research community. And that was why research professional was so good. And Elsevier was winning slight brownie points with that kind of, objective. To take it away and leave nothing in its place, moreover than that, saying, yeah, it's really important, but, we'll ask somebody who are less fortunate or worse positioned than us to fill the void, is just, I'll say it again, it's horrendous. It's really bad taste. I'm not happy. Not happy, Jan, sorry.
I think that's allowed. Being not happy about that decision is definitely the way I think the rest of the sector felt about it too. I think there's only a few people who were happy about it, potentially all elsewhere.
Yeah, all in Elsevier. Yeah.
But there we go. Still, there is still news out there, and I got strong interest in Times Higher at the moment because they did 2 articles which I thought were quite funny that they came out both in the same month. Would you like to hear about those?
Yeah, go on, give us a laugh.
So earlier on in the month, the article came out. The REF is eroding research integrity in UK accounting and finance, by Chen Su at the National University of Ireland, and it was all about so this name inflation that you get in papers as everybody piles in and tries to get their names on things that they can therefore use later on in the REF. So the REF bad for research integrity, and then later in the month, greater research integrity likely for REF 2029. I thought, well, which way are we going? And that was about the importance of research integrity as a concept being, especially in things like the spree. So I just thought it was interesting. There's conflict in within a month in one publication.
So tell me again. Research integrity, REF is bad for research integrity because everybody puts their names on all the papers and it means nothing, even though putting a name on the paper doesn't exactly give any advantage or whatever. But at the same time, REF is bad for research, good for research integrity because it becomes a tick box exercise for spree. Is that, have I got that? See, this is why we need
cynical take on it, but yes, I guess.
Sorry, but a duck is a duck. I'm just trying to interpret it, and again, this is why credit goes to Times Higher Education for giving a voice, but this is why we need research professionals. Literally, there's so much noise in. Is your research integrity better than this research integrity? Is it? It's just we need a consolidating voice, and that's why research professional is so important. So. I'm glad that there's 2 sides of the debate. I'm not really quite sure if there's a middle ground or what it is, but
is there tension between what people are doing, what academics and researchers are doing, because they're trading in the currency of authorship? So that's a very internal culture level thing. And the REF is going to try to deal with that by encouraging integrity in spree,
No, but the REF is a big thing of the REF is team science. Really big thing is a team science. So if you're going to kind of cut down on large authorship teams as a first kind of idea, look, where does this research integrity or grade of, author inflation happen? But they're then going to cut down on team science, but at the same time encourage team science. Right hand, left hand, hello, talk to each other, please.
Oh, but team science and inflating authorship, that they're 2 different sides.
No, I do, but how are they going to cut down on I get author inflationship is a bad idea, but what they're going to do is okay, there's a big authorship team here. Let's focus on them and give them greater scrutiny and greater onus of burden of proof that something is not happening. But that could actually be evidence of good team science. So I'm a bit confused about, I understand it's a problem, but I don't think the REF is a tool in which you can actually systematically identify that.
The way that I see this happening is that one article is talking about a sort of a side effect of the REF process, of the gaming that goes on around whenever you give processes to anybody, especially academics, right? But when you give it to anybody, you get that sort of gamification going on and people try to dupe the stats. It's that sort of thing. And then the later article is actually saying about how the REF is telling universities that research integrity is important and it should be part of the spree. And perhaps in their statement there, they could talk about how they stopped some of the gamification of the REF stats and things like author inflationship. Inflation.
Look, I get authorship inflation. Yeah.
Authorship
but
inflation.
Look, I get that. I get that. But the idea that you can create a REF or any competitive exercise without some form of gamification is just false. It's just not going to happen. So where is that line between acceptable gamification? Impossible to track gamification that is bad. And how do you make that line between I want to encourage X, but I know that Y is going to be inevitable side, is going to be an inevitable consequence. Where do I find the balance? And I guess perhaps what I'm saying here is the REF is a unit of assessment exercise. It's not an individual exercise. So its job is not to police individual choices, whether they're right or wrong. And gamification in terms of authorship inflation, I'm having trouble too, is is wrong, but it's
so they're
not up to
passing
the
the back
ref.
to the institutions, right? To
It's
police
not
that.
up. Hang on, no, but it's not up to the ref. It's not up to the ref to police that kind of institutional culture. It's up to the institutions to do it. So to ask the ref is somehow going to encourage it or decourage it or whatever is placing the wrong role on the ref. And again, overlooking the role of the institutions to make sure that this doesn't happen and the choices of individuals which are made under institutional environments. So again, it's not the ref's role, it's institutions. So really that article should be rewritten, said universities should do this, not the ref.
Yeah, I guess the point is that the ref is trying to put the reward structure into place, and then the universities are meant to follow it in a particular way, and then some of them don't. Well, or maybe not the universities, but at least the people within those universities then look at how they can game the system. So there is a role for the ref to sort of say what they want to see. It's just not their responsibility to make the universities actually do the right thing.
Well, watch this space.
Watch this space.
Well,
Sorry to our listeners if I'm seeming very feisty, but I was up very late watching the football last night. Viva la Roja! And nothing gets me more feisty than competitive sport. So,
for those who are listening to us on Spotify, Gemma's got a lovely nail varnish in Spanish colours. They can't see.
It took me about 10 minutes to make that connection this morning when you showed us. I was just like, oh yes, the game last night.
It's a little bit too subtle for me, right? So usually I'm like,
too subtle for me, certainly. So what's your connection with Spain, Gemma? I think we have to make that connection because you've not got a Spanish accent.
No, unfortunately not. No, I married Spain. So I did my postdoc in Spain and I love Spain. And I ended up meeting my husband there. My child is Spanish and my in-laws are in Spain. And there's more of my husband's family than there are of mine. So if it comes down to sheer numbers, Spain wins out over Australia any time. But yeah, I mean, I think when you marry Spain, you marry La Roja, the team, and you marry a Spanish football team. And I didn't understand football until I moved to Spain. Still don't understand the offside. Yeah, but you have no choice, and it's a beautiful, beautiful environment to be in when you're in Spain.
It's like that in the UK, that if you come to the UK, you've got to love football, right, Simon?
Oh, well,
you love football, don't you?
No. Hey, last week I watched my first game of football in a pub. And
in a pub,
it was Argentina and England, right? And it was actually really exciting. And I came back home and I was talking to my wife, and I was like, I don't think I could do this all the time because I was just like kind of feeling sick with the fact that they were one goal up at the start, and then they were constantly defending against that. And I was like, imagine that's every weekend you have to go through that stress. Like
you don't do it it's every 4 years. I mean, the World Cup's every 4 years, so you can handle it every 4 years. And then 2 years if you want to do the Euros in between. But I thought
people do football as a sort of daily thing, don't they? I mean, our weekly thing.
Oh yeah, there are those people. I'm not one of those.
Simon is not one of them.
No, the first World Cup that Spain won, Australia qualified, and we were very excited just to be there. Like we were so excited to be there. Because Australia's not particularly good at football, except if the women's football, the Matildas, but. Yeah, I think in Spain, it's a very positive experience. It really is. It's a little bit different to anywhere I've described, experienced before when it comes to football. I would go and watch the football in a pub quite easily in Spain and then go and party in the street afterwards until 3 a.m.
Well, having experience,
7 a.m.
I can recommend it. No. Anyways,
Great.
so an unusual diversion for us onto the football, especially for me.
Back to research. Another competitive sport. Let's get back to research.
Another competitive sport with very, very bad rules. So the only other thing I wanted to say was there is a webinar about ref policy that the Research England and the ref team are running 31st of July. Look on the website if you want to take part in that. It's not about opening up the debates, they were saying. It's more about a discussion around the nuances of some of the policies, but I think that could be quite interesting.
Oh, right. A discussion around the nuances of policies. That's going to be a very long discussion.
Could be months.
They don't want that.
No. I think that's what they were trying to. They were trying to lead with their description of it, as in we're not opening things up again. We're just kind of having a bit of a discussion about some of the nuances. Anyways, that is the news. So the major thing that we've got for this episode is we have an interview. It's with Alexandra Murphy and Ian Hutchinson from the Arts University Plymouth. Now, Ola and I went and did an NTO workshop there earlier in the year, and I say at the start, and I was a bit embarrassed when I listened to it. I was buzzing at the end of it, but I genuinely was, right. It was a really,
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was
It was
really
so
nice.
warmly received and spoiled, let's say, and shown the facilities. It was just amazing what they've got there.
Yeah.
Totally impressing. So yeah, and they've got a very unique story, right?
Yes,
because we get kind of used to the fact that universities just do the ref, but they haven't.
So let's hear from them talking about their first upcoming ref in 2029. Let's listen to the interview.
Oh, this is going to be good.
So Alexandra and Ian, welcome to What the Ref.
Hello.
Hi there, Simon.
So this came about, this interview, because we were in Plymouth in March and we ran an NTO workshop for you. And I don't mean in disregard to the other universities that we've done workshops for, but it was an absolutely fantastic workshop. Ola and I were absolutely buzzing afterwards. And I think that was because just the energy about your university, because this is your first ref. And I think there's obviously lots of opportunities, and we really felt that when we met with you all. So this is your first ref. What did it feel like the first time that somebody said to you, "We're doing the ref"?
It's a good question. Well, yeah, just to sort of pick up on that, we are 170 years old. So as an institution, we're one of the oldest specialist arts universities, but we are one of the newest universities in itself. So as an art school, we've been around for 170 years, but only been a university for 4 years. So yes, so when we were first sort of talking about ref and deciding to actually sort of submit to it, it was a case of trying to understand really what that meant to us as a whole new university. From my perspective, it was a case of, crikey, okay, there's this thing. We kind of understand the words around that, but what does that mean to us as an institution? And I think probably most people probably would be the same as myself. It was like, where do we start with something like this? How do we start to unpick what a submission would look like for a new university? So it was that kind of exploration for us about understanding what are the components, what are the aspects that we need to actually start to map out before we can actually really be kind of clear about how we go forward with this piece, this project effectively.
So how does that process even begin? I mean, there must be millions of things you have to think about. So where do you start?
Yeah, and I mean, I think in terms of what we thought the first time it was said, I don't think perhaps the enormity of the amount of material that we were going to have to get through was apparent. I mean, certainly for me, I came new into a new role, and it was like one of the things on the to-do list. And obviously, we do what people always do in those circumstances. Like, great, we'll read the guidelines, and sort of came back up 6 months later and went, right, there's quite a lot here to work through. And also because at that time, a lot of the guidelines for this ref referred back to the previous refs. Then you had to read those, which sometimes said, well, this is quite, just the changes from the previous refs. So actually we had to do 3 refs worth of reading. And I think Ian and I were fairly, we went a bit old school on it. We got out the Post-it notes and the markers and the flip charts and just had to visually map what this thing called ref was and how to get there.
Absolutely. We kind of treated it a bit like a project. How do we break this down into sort of components? How do we start to understand it? And that sort of loop within the guidelines sort of had us a little bit worried initially. There were some bits where it referred to previous refs and elements that were to be sort of described in the future. So we kind of thought, okay, we just need to map this out. And we kind of quickly also realized when we spoke to others and other institutions that there wasn't really a sort of a clear view. There was lots of people had aspects or understood aspects of the ref return, or they're involved in different levels or different parts. And certainly within our institution, we knew people who had been involved as academics that had provided outputs that were returned to a ref. But actually, internally, we discovered that we didn't have, I guess, that detailed knowledge already embedded in the university. So, just exploring about how we can learn quickly And then how do we start to tackle each aspect, recognizing also that we need to kind of get all the bits completed by a particular date.
Yeah. And I think a really key component of it as well is we are a really small university. We're a small specialist university. So as sort of indicated by Ian there, it wasn't a case of, okay, well, this team or this department will deal with this bit and somebody else is going to deal with this bit. It's effectively the same people dealing with all of it simultaneously from scratch and trying to see how that all connects together. So that in one way is quite nice because we get a really holistic understanding of it. But at the same time, it's a huge amount to try and piece together when you don't have other departments or other teams to work from you. So we've had to take it on in that sense as at an institutional level. We had to make a real commitment to actually, we're going to put a huge amount of time and resources from these, same group of people in a lot of instances to really dedicate ourselves to get this done.
Yeah.
So that's a huge amount of work for a significant ref team. So what sort of size of team are we talking about here that's doing all of this reading, which I think I once calculated took hundreds of days. What size of team are you working with?
I'm trying to think how many of us there are. So I think the core of us are six or seven, working around, I guess, all aspects. So we broke it down into sort of work streams and work packages. We proper went sort of project management style on this, and that seemed the most appropriate route. So how do we deal with the governance and the sort of structural aspects of our return? And then how do we deal with certainly the three key elements to ref? And then providing, I guess, the most appropriate chair for those to actually then drive and steer. Even though we're all involved probably across most of the components, actually we felt that certain experiences or seniority would sit at certain places across that. And that's kind of worked really well so far. We have kind of just recently sort of rechecked in on that model just to make sure that we're not sort of overcomplicating matters. But it's certainly allowed us to start, that sort of get going really early on and actually sort of move forward with purpose.
Yeah, I think initially Ian and I did a huge amount of that reading to sort of understand what kind of structure that might need to be to fit together and deliver that. And then once the institution got behind that and our colleagues got behind that, just as Ian said, then it was able to be sort of divided up so that everyone has a particular area of responsibility that they're leading on and are therefore the primary reader of all of those things.
And I think we knew it was big, but I think after a month or two, it was a bit of oh, wow, okay, this is complicated, this is complex. We have to be really sort of, thorough in the way that we take this forward. So we don't sort of go off course at any point. So we're not having to undo any of the work that we're kind of putting in at the sort of foundation and the framework phase.
Yeah, and not least because they've changed things during the course of it. So, we've just about got our heads around something and, that core group of us that are working on it, really important to disseminating that understanding to all of our colleagues through the university so everyone else understands it. So we'd digest that, we'd figure it out, we'd find a way to represent that back to other people who weren't as entrenched in the process in a meaningful way. And then something would change and you have to sort of unpick it. Or like some areas, they'll say, we don't have the guidelines yet. Wait and watch this space, which when you're starting from nothing, when you haven't, from that mobilization, it's not like we have, we can always go back to the last one and just adjust from there because we're starting everything from zero. So that's really problematic for us, those delays.
So you're waiting for that guidance to come out before you can get started on that aspect, whereas other universities would possibly just do what they did last time and hope that changes haven't been made.
Yeah, they have absolutely. They have something that they can at least review or revise or reconsider. And for us, it's new, so we don't want to get it wrong. And we're a small team, as Alexandra said, so we don't want to get it wrong. So I guess there's brilliance and benefit for us not having anything that clouds what we're doing, but it does mean that we feel like we have a huge mountain to climb. So, being a little bit wet behind the ears, at this point, it has both sides. It has pros and cons to the journey, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
So if you've got 6 people, you've got to get them all up to speed in this brand new process. There's a huge amount of ambiguity in the guidance. In fact, some guidance doesn't exist yet. A lot's riding on the results overall. I mean, what's keeping you awake at night at the moment? What's your sort of key worries? Maybe
All
of the above. Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, because there is so much information to digest, and there's no part of it that comes with a manual or that says, oh, and if this is your first ref, or anything like that. So a lot of it, we are attending all the webinars, all the town halls. We, do get support from Guild HE. We're a member of Guild HE. But there's an awful lot of time of us reading things and trying to connect the dots and then having to check in with each other and say, I think this means this. Do you think the same thing? And us sort of having to collaborate on that understanding. And I think my worry is always a little bit of like, but what if we didn't quite get something? What if there was something and that's a small thing, but may, scupper there's something big that goes further down the line because we didn't quite understand what that meant, or it had implications that at the time we didn't know, having not been through ref, that's what was going to mean later on.
Absolutely, that's so true. And I think on top of that, I think there's an element about judgment too. I think us understanding what we have and what level or quality that it sort of sits within in terms of research outputs, or our impact and all those things, are we being hard on ourselves? Are we being too soft on ourselves? Where do we place our research and the work that we're generating here? And I think for me, that's kind of one of the things that keeps me awake, because we can undersell ourselves, or we could over pitch and think that we're putting in a really high quality return, but actually we kind of miss the mark. So I think that on top of all of the complexities of understanding the guidance, that kind of runs sort of true as well, I think.
Well, yeah, because a Gantt chart can't tell you that. Do you know what I mean? There is so much that I can create a spreadsheet, or we can make a Gantt chart, or we can put plans, or, write all of those things. We can you can tick box your way through as much as you can. But there are some things that you can't do that for. And yeah, it's that, it's that quality conversation. And that's why for us, having the opportunity to meet with yourselves and have that NTO workshop was really, really valuable for us. And for all of our colleagues in the room, I know found it really valuable just to get to drill down with other people into, well, what is this? And what is this thing that we're doing? And how does that look like the way that other people are doing it? And are we okay that our way looks different? And I think that it is, but, okay.
That's right. And I think the danger, marking your own homework is always a difficult thing, isn't it? So having that external view or having others look in really helps us. Certainly point us in the right direction. It kind of gives us assurances as well. And as Alexandra said, like the hidden ref workshop that we had absolutely started to help us actually understand more about what we have and what we're doing, what we're doing right and maybe what we're not. Yeah.
So I want to come back to something that you said there, Ian, actually. And I thought, are there benefits to coming to the ref sort of unencumbered by this is what we did last time? I realize it might feel like a bit of a shaky position to be caught in, but I think there must be benefits there too.
Oh, definitely. I think part of the return is about describing the journey, the research journey that you've undertaken, and about, I guess, that distance traveled from the last return. And for us, well, we haven't returned, but also the journey that we have undergone is huge in relative terms. So there are, we don't have any misconceptions, I guess. We haven't had experiences that either have, I guess, given us overconfidence or underconfidence. We haven't been sort of polluted by certain things. Not that I'm saying others have, but ultimately, we're coming in, I guess, eager and keen. And I think that does allow us to be optimistic for sure, and also give us an opportunity to really sort of celebrate the work, the research that's going on here at the university and all of the things that we're doing. So there absolutely are huge benefits. And being part of that journey, we recognise We return to, we're not talking about today, but the KEF, and that's something that we don't have to do. We don't receive high funding, but we absolutely see the benefits of doing that, and actually putting ourselves out there and setting ourselves up against other universities is really important to us. So it's the same with REF. It's absolutely one of the things that we see as an important part of our journey.
And I think another benefit that's come from it, I mean, yeah, absolutely, the newness has that benefit, but also, while some parts of that preparation for REF have been trying or challenging or time consuming, I think there's also an authenticity in terms of actually they've been very valuable for us as well. So developing some of those things about like thinking about the code of conduct, doing some, upping our levels of training in different areas, thinking through our processes and the way we're making decisions and why we're doing things, I think has been a really valuable process for us as well as a university, regardless of the REF thing. So there's a positivity to that because there's so many positive influences that it's having on our research culture.
That is so true. Yeah, that's a really good point. That sort of growth that we're going through because of the process is really helping us. It's really focusing the work that we do and the way we talk to our academics. It really is making a significant shift.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think the REF is a wonderful driver of research culture change. So, of course, coming to it for the first time means you can actually set up a lot of these processes and actually have to, for the first time, maybe investigate some areas of your university's work. And I could see how that could drive things in a particular direction. But I want to come back to your university and the way that you look at research because and how that fits in with the REF, because you're a specialist arts university, which means you'd be focusing mainly on panel D, and I realize that this is the first time you're going through the process. But does the REF feel like it's designed for universities like yours? And if that's not the case, what would you like to change?
I mean, I think it absolutely doesn't feel like it's designed for university. I mean, I think one of the really interesting discussions that we were having when you were here for the NTA workshop was, just where do you even place it? Like, if it's not a journal paper, like in the categorization, we're like, so much of our stuff is other. We are the other category of all of that. It doesn't, yes, there might be something in it that's an artifact, and there might be something that's an exhibition, and there might be a publication, or there might be something else. But for us, because it's about bringing that all together as sort of a body of things, and that's where the power of that piece of research comes from, we sit in this other camp. So I think that in itself shows that it's not designed for us, but hopefully we can find a way to navigate that and actually, really show what we are within that.
Yeah, and actually looking, because we've not been in, we've not returned before, so it's hard to kind of know, but sort of looking back, it looks like it's definitely improved. That's definitely something that we've seen when we've done some of the research across the previous years. And as Alexandra rightly said, it's still not perfect, but ultimately, we're trying to find our ways so that we speak rightly to the REF and that we describe the research that takes place here in a way that absolutely we can sell it into the formats. And I think the non-traditional outputs piece is absolutely, as Alexandra mentioned, and the other aspects are really going to be a key focus for us because so much of the research that takes place here sits within that space.
Yeah.
So dealing with the othering of outputs that a lot of your academics are producing, I mean, could you address that by having more categories, or is there a new approach to the CKU that you would like to see?
I mean, I think that's hard until we, I guess, have been through it and seen how the things that we've put together are taken. But I mean, I think for the majority of our outputs, what the approach we're taking is it's kind of a portfolio approach, because for us so often, the engagements and the making and the knowledge exchange aspects and the research are all very iterative. They're very overlapping. They're not able to be quite so cleanly pulled apart and put into the box of, this is your output and this is what this bit does. And that, like, you have to look at it in that holistic way. So, I mean, I guess if there was another category for me, it would be about that, given a portfolio where you're looking actually at a selection and a body of outputs, and that the strength comes from how they work together and what that means for them working together rather than sort of individual things.
Yeah, and it's about, I guess, approaching creative outputs in the same seriousness as they would with, I guess, sort of journals or scientific papers, so that I guess the sort of the depth within creative practice absolutely can be represented in a portfolio approach, and making sure that that is being considered in the same way, so that sort of, I guess, the methodologies and the findings and I guess the rigor is demonstrated through that creative practice and process. And as long as we demonstrate that properly enough and, you know, in the right way, that it's considered in the right way and is seen as to be equal.
So that's quite an interesting take on things. So if we were to look at how creative outputs are being assessed, for example, if you had sort of, you know, 5 minutes alone with a ref panelist. Sorry, I've said that and it now sounds really sinister. I mean, 5 minutes alone in a nice way, chatting to them about things that could change. So if you had 5 minutes alone with a ref panelist, and you wanted to talk about creative outputs, I mean, what would you want them to understand or do differently?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think as Alexandra was describing earlier on, I think it's around how that package of creative practice, the fact that creative disciplines do deal with research questions within their practice and their approach and the journey that work or creative academics, the journey that they go on. So I think it's important to kind of ensure that the ref panel understand that the creative outputs aren't just about, I guess, illustrations of research, but they are research themselves. And I guess to consider and understand the significance of that for us, and the fact that it has equal weighting and should absolutely be viewed in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, it's about the complexity of it. And I mean, of course, no research is ever entirely linear. But I think within creative practice, it can become very, very complex in terms of which of those different stages of the process are you in. You know, the if it's an artifact, the artifact is embodying the process. So actually we can't separate those two. And actually, you know, if you're doing something maybe that's socially engaged or that's working with a community group, that could be both a research engagement to have learning from and investigation through. It can also at the same time be about dissemination. It can be about all of those things. And I think that complexity, if people are used to very linear thinking, just needs a bit more. It's about being open to breaking that down and actually challenging what does it look like, and does it have to look like that one thing? I think that's the main thing. It's a tangled web.
Yeah, and it's
but it's all there. That doesn't mean it's not strong and it's not there. It's just a little bit more intricate to unpick.
I think it's recognizing that it's a different form, isn't it, to sort of traditional roots. So the expectations absolutely need to be the same around originality and significance and all those things. But absolutely, it's recognizing that it's different and they don't necessarily look the same.
So does an arts university see research differently to, say, a multidisciplinary university or a different non-arts university? Is that the issue we're really getting to here?
Well, I think
that's a big question.
Yeah, no, I think arts universities, creative universities, are really comfortable with practice as modes of inquiry, and I think that sort of discovery through practice is what happens through being creative, through making, through ideation within the creative journey. And I think because of that, we maybe don't see it. Definitely the journey is probably different, and sometimes we do have to encourage certainly our early career researchers to kind of understand what they're doing absolutely speaks to the research journey. And sometimes that's not necessarily understood by those that are moving into the research space from an arts practice. But absolutely, that I think. I guess we just have a different way of doing it, and it's absolutely about understanding or getting our researchers, or early career researchers, to understand that what they're doing absolutely follows that track and all of the aspects. As long as you're recording and documenting it and being able to play that back in the right way, means that we are doing research. And I think it's just about how we're framing those things.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, my own background is from sort of a different, sort of academic background from both arts universities and non-arts universities. But I, within sort of a more traditional sort of university, would never have had to be in a situation of telling somebody why this is research. I was investigating, I was inquiring, I was exploring, as were my colleagues. And we were based in a university. Nobody ever questioned us as to whether what we're doing is research. Whereas within an arts university, we're already at the beginning and having to say, but this is research, and defining this as research. And I think that as Ian was saying, is one of the big challenges, and not just on that outward facing thing, because our researchers are teachers. They are, here, they're lecturers here, but they're also practitioners. So they've got this third strand of their identity that they are sort of exploring, and they're completely intertwined and they're completely engaged. But for us to be able to support them to articulate to themselves as well as to the outside, actually, why this practice is research and how this practice is research, and how that's influencing teaching. It's just, again, to go back to that thing, that it's just very complex and intertwined. But, our practitioners are doing practice, and they are doing research within their practice. And those two terms sometimes can seem a little bit that if we talk about practice, it makes people feel that perhaps it's therefore not research. But certainly, if you were a scientist doing experimental practice in a lab, nobody would say, well, then that can't be research because it's science, and so it's that disciplinary thing. But certainly, it's only within an arts university context that I've ever had to defend whether something is actually research or not.
So how do you take your practitioners and your academics through that process in a way that will work with the ref? I mean, do you have a sort of standard approach, or was that work not started yet?
I think we've been feeling our way and trying to bring them on that journey with us. And because we don't receive QR funding, we are not, the best sort of resource around that. So instead, we've been trying to sort of have those conversations with our academics, helping them to understand, trying to help them articulate it within terms that other people, the amount of things were like, okay, well, this is great. What's the question? Can you tell me what the question is? Let's go back to basics, and just really provoking those conversations, because the answers are there. The research is there, the practice is there, people are doing those things, but it's just sort of been about provoking that, trying to get that, helping everybody to get that out, and for us to institutionally talk about things in those terms. And that has meant sometimes like, great, let's fill in some more forms to talk about our research. Let's start practicing how we're going to write this when it gets to ref. We have launched our open access repository, and are now we've been supporting our researchers to actually put together some practice-based documents that are sort of like big portfolio documents to evidence the work that they've been doing and help them show it in that way. So we've been trying to work in quite a practical way, and introducing things, and also finding sometimes that we've used a load of terminology and language that are so ref focused that we've lost everybody along the way, and they're no longer listening to us, and they don't know what we're talking about, and probably close my emails. So, and having to go, okay, right, we need to take a breath. We need to go back to hearts and minds. We need to, bring everyone back on board, and make it more accessible again, and make sure we're all going together.
Oh no, I thought that was well said, and actually, those processes, or those sort of the toolkits that we put together, they weren't obvious to us initially, were they? We had to go through a journey ourselves to understand, how do we start to help, and how do we start to sort of gather this information. And, as Alexandra rightly said about that sort of the journey of our academics and the work that they've been producing, absolutely is full-on research. And I think it's just about making sure that we're ensuring that they're kind of, I guess, replaying and retelling the things that they know. So quite often, sort of from a practice-based practitioner, their work may culminate in an exhibition, or it might be a performance, and they have done all of the things that sort of show the full breadth of their research, but they haven't just sort of compiled it in a way that demonstrates that, or talks about that, or distributes it, or has the output that kind of describes it in that way. And actually, the whole approach that Alexandra was describing was about, I guess, showing and demonstrating and helping our academics appreciate that they're doing it. And it's not that much more. There's only a few more steps you have to do to complete that circle, to actually have the full package already there and ready to then sort of to publish.
And that's such a key part, isn't it? As Alexandra was saying earlier on, where you've got to reconnect the academics back into this process. Because I think, regardless of what discipline you're in, a lot of people will feel a disconnect from REF because they see it as a sort of separate bureaucratic process. But it has this, as I said earlier, a great power to change research culture and to drive things forward. But getting people to care about it is actually quite a difficult thing, especially if you're new to the process or far removed from it. And it's one of the key things that we're doing with the Hidden Ref, which is trying to get everybody to engage with the REF process. Because if we do that, then we can definitely drive things in the right direction.
Absolutely. Sorry, go on, Alexandra.
I was going to say, I think that sort of the process on the research side is, it's something that Ian says quite a lot. There are, artists don't really want you to necessarily always see what's sitting behind the thing. And actually, what we've had to do and been working really hard with our academics and also, technicians with the much wider sort of, because, it's practice, things don't always happen in a silo. So is actually going, no, we want to know about the process. We want you to tell us. So here's a folder, dump all of your stuff in it as you go, take photos, show us your notebooks, all of that stuff that perhaps within practice that's aiming towards a very sort of hermetically sealed exhibition, this is my final product, is entirely counterintuitive, is for us to say, no, expose that, tell us about that. And that's quite dangerous feeling, I think, for some of our staff to have to do that, and some of them to be actually, but I have that all and now I'm going to put it on display. And that's quite a vulnerable moment, I think, for a lot of people. But at the same time, once we've started having some of those conversations, when we've met in groups or one-on-one and we start talking about elements of that, it's really wonderful to see people getting excited to talk about something that happened in their process or that was a really great moment for them, and actually realize that people want to know about that. They want to hear that, and that's where the excitement is. So, yeah, I think that's been a challenge.
I think that's the exciting part, isn't it? When people start to understand that following some of these processes actually can do a lot for your research or your practice, because you're actually opening up and thinking through the process and sharing that with others who can build on it. Sorry, I cut you up, Ian.
Yeah, no. I totally agree with Alexandra on that, and I think part of, I guess, the work that the team that's been working around sort of the ref structure has been, how do we make that as easy as possible? How do we take some of that pain? We can't take all of the pain, but how do we take some of that pain away so that our academics can then apply those things? So creating the templates and the modeling. Alexandra also sort of touched on technicians, and that's one of the fantastic aspects to Hidden Ref and the presentation and the workshop that you ran, and I guess with us as well, that so much activity happens alongside or alongside our academics with our technicians, but also the technicians are doing a whole load of research themselves independently as well. So for us, one of the great things, or one of the opportunities for us, is to really celebrate that aspect of our institution, that all of our technicians are artists and makers, They are academics as well in their own right, or are certainly trained to a high level. Some have PhDs, so actually they are developing and creating and, exploring all kinds of aspects within their practice or within sort of materiality within the university. And actually, this really gives us an opportunity to sort of celebrate that as well. And that's something that I don't think initially we had really recognized sort of day one, but quite quickly we sort of saw that was absolutely something that we should be doing. So I think that's something that we're looking forward to doing as part of our return.
That's incredible to hear.
Yeah.
So I started off by asking you about, what was it like when you first heard that you were doing the ref? So I thought maybe we could end on kind of what success will look like when you're finished with this process. So is it just about getting a good submission together and having it sent off? Are you looking for broader changes in the university in general? Well, where do you want to be in 2030? And you're going to come back and tell us about it.
I think one of the things to say as well is obviously we are working towards this ref, but we're also very much in our conversations, in our internal sort of culture, we are working towards the next ref already. We know that some of that work that we are doing right now with the very early career researchers, we are bringing them on the journey. We are making sure that they're going to be represented in our repository, whether or not they are part of a return. We're making sure that everybody is having access to that same information and that opportunity, because we know that after this ref, there is another ref. And actually, it's not just about, okay, let's put all of our energy just into 28 and then start being at 29, and then being starting for a standstill. Like, we need to have a trajectory that is actually, as I said before, a more authentic approach that is bringing us institutionally and our people in our community on that journey.
Totally right. Yeah, I think it's the foundation year for us, isn't it? It's the year that gets us in. It's the year that tests us in this space. I think we recognise that the next ref will be our bigger ref, the ref that we really are firing on all cylinders. I think if it's just about a submission, we're really missing a major opportunity for us. Alexandra mentioned about culture. I think that's absolutely it. Success is the cultural change, the shift institutionally. Ref is a moment in time, isn't it? It's a sort of slice of, it's looking in and sort of seeing what we've done within this sort of 7-year, 8-year period. I think, we can demonstrate we are doing incredible things. And I think it's about keeping that momentum, enjoying that cultural shift. If there are benefits from returning to the ref through funding, hopefully that will allow us to make step changes as well within the institution and really start to sort of grow further and celebrate the research. So I think it absolutely is important to us, but I think we see it as a moment within our much larger research journey.
Yeah, but of course, as Ian said, if there's funding and things, and I think that is, that is also obviously a key thing for us, given that we're not in receipt of QR funding, that to get into, our staff are doing so much and we're institutionally trying to do so much with very little resource in terms of sort of dedicated time, little resource in terms of people and things like that. So, I think we're also really wanting this ref to help unlock things so that we can really properly get behind those staff that want to be on that trajectory and that have that ambition, and that we can help support them to realize those ambitions. So that, to come the next ref, we're in an even better position. But I think there's sort of a bit of a magic unlocking for us, I think, in us to be able to actually do the things that we're so ready to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. Leaving us with more confidence and allowing us to have that, I guess, that foundation to really sort of stride forward from.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking us through the journey of university, approaching the ref for the first time ever. And thank you also for the invitation to come and do the workshop. And Alexandra and Ian, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for that. That was really interesting. So guys, what was your feeling? Like, they're doing the ref for the first time and they're trying to work out what the rules are and how ambiguous they are and just trying to give it their best shot ever. I mean, what was the feeling when you were there? What were they talking to you about?
So I have to say that, like we said beforehand, like there was just a huge amount of energy. There was a lot of, I was talking to Ola afterwards, and I was like, sometimes, some of these universities that have been through it, a ton of times previously, if you go and talk to them about the next ref, and they're already kind of sagging under the weight of it. Oh God, we're doing it again, and they have to, and especially if they're quite high up the rankings, they have to do well. So it's just pressure. And we were there at Arts University Plymouth, right? And they were just kind of like bright and vibrant and excited about it. And we were saying that's such a difference if it's your first one. But I have to say the big thing for me was when we were doing the interview, I just naively assumed there would be a guide, so you're doing your first ref kind of thing. And there wasn't, they just had to piece it together and work out. And especially Alexandra later on saying that one of the things that keeps her up is just, did they interpret something wrong? I just thought, that is a huge amount of pressure. So it's quite impressive that they're staying exciting and vibrant and all that sort of stuff under that pressure of doing their first ever ref.
And what made me chuckle is when I think Ian said, well, let's read the guidance and let's meet in 6 months' time.
6 months' time. What, there wasn't enough time, or it was just like what the
Probably not enough. I don't think it was. I think they're still reading and they're still interpreting. I think it's a project management approach to this.
I think what I'm questioning too is the how good or how effective reading previous ref submissions and rules is going to be, considering that this ref is in itself extremely different from 2014, and it's supposed to emulate ref 2021. But even when we come down to the unit of assessment allocations and staff allocation rules, it's going to be very different, which has, follow-on effects about how it's operationalized on an individual level. So I don't know how useful that is going to be, or whether it is going to create further misunderstandings, or whether it's going to put them on par with the rest of the sector, which in terms of misunderstandings, because the rest of the sector has that experience of putting in ref 2014 and 2021.
I guess it's just getting the flavor of what other universities have been doing, and the scale of the challenge and the complexity and intricacy of those different levels and, modules of assessment. So maybe even though it's not exactly the same, it helps them to not sleep at night.
Yeah, but I mean,
one of
the things the ref team keeps saying, which I'm going to give them credit for, is the fact that it's less about gamification and more about, telling us your journey, especially in the SPRE statement. They say, tell us your journey. And they're usually referring to, financial challenges that every unit of assessment is facing. Put that in the SPRE, right? We are having this financial challenges. We had to reduce our FTE by this amount. Our funding dried up, or whatever, and put that in as a narrative arc in there. I mean, the same thing can happen here, where you say this is the first ref that we've ever done. We were motivated to do this. We've already been seeing some changes just by being refable, which they were referring to in the interview, and that could be their journey arc. But I guess they don't necessarily feel so confident to do that, and I'm interested to find out why.
So I think ultimately they're in the same situation as everybody else. The rules weren't quite set when they had to get started, and they were going off what had happened previously. It just wasn't what they had done previously; it was what other people had done previously. So I guess they're in very much the same sort of backwards looking and trying to do forward planning approach that everybody is with the ref. So hopefully that's not a disadvantage to them. I guess the big thing for me was just like the amount of, we talk about folklore and all that sort of stuff, the amount of like folklore and ref misinterpretation that you'd have to wade through would be quite significant. And, if you've done it before and you've made an assumption about how a guideline or a rule will be interpreted, you've at least got that to fall back on. Whereas every single rule interpretation, question will be, well, let's just choose to do it this way and hope for the best, and they'll just be stacking those up one after another. So I think there'll be a lot of pressure on the people who did the interpretation, which was Alexandra and Ian by the sounds of it, and also a small team as well, not a big team of people to rely on. So there's quite a lot of responsibility on those shoulders.
But on the other hand, they haven't got those myths baked into the institution, so they have absolutely no institutional memory whatsoever, which is daunting. But on the other hand, can be quite refreshing and freeing,
I don't think they see it that way, though.
No,
they don't
I
see
think
it as
they did
refreshing and
mention
free.
that there was a positive. There was a positive that they're kind of coming with a fresh pair of eyes, and they maybe they can shape it in the way that they see art as research and practice as research. And there was a really interesting question, Simon, that you asked them. You know, how do you think the ref should be for your purpose? Because it's not about really trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So how would you design it if it was just about universities like you? That was such an interesting question, and a difficult one as well.
Yeah, I said, if you got 5 minutes alone with a ref panelist, and which I did that thing where I started laughing as I realized that sounded really sinister. But I was kind of like, but I meant as in so they could persuade them for something. But I think getting them, the way they talk through the sort of practice-based research, and then the way that the outputs are part of the research itself and also part of a story around the research. And they got into portfolios and things, which I thought was, again, we've talked about that a lot on the podcast, just because they do seem to be the way that you provide that narrative around an output that doesn't have its own internally baked in a narrative like a journal article. So I thought it was interesting to see them coming back to that. And I do think that's going to be a significant part of not traditionally submitted outputs in general. This whole thing about practice-based research is, this is quite new to me, and with my sort of STEM background. And they were saying there was an interesting point, I think, where Alexandra was saying, if you do a load of research processes in a sort of STEM background, everybody sort of sees that as research, but they don't see it as research when it's arts based. And I'm struggling to understand why there are different interpretations of basically the same process, just in a different discipline.
Yeah. I think that's the idea. It's like seeing art as art, but then when you start becoming refable, or you become an organization that's focused on ref, art becomes research. And that kind of identity change can be very difficult. We're seeing that in the NTO workshops. We're seeing that in the rapid review. We're seeing that in the Think Aloud, is the separation between art, the research process, and the research outcome. And, with an article, all of this information is in one form and it's easy to assess, but with NTOs, they're separated to the point where an NTO sometimes doesn't have a record of the research process. It is just seen as evidence of art, which is immediately thought of as this is not research, and therefore, scores lower on rigor and originality and significance.
So they've got work to do in terms of, the mechanics of the submission. But I think what was also very fascinating about the interview is that they've got to tackle the third identity of the staff that they've got there. So they've got obviously academics and they've got artists who now have to become researchers, and, how to win their hearts and minds, how to keep them enthused and on board with it. I think they've got a really incredible challenge with it.
So why are they enthused of being on board? Like, why are they doing this? I mean, a lot of people in the sector would say be something that they could literally get rid of, or if you stiffen Colheany, get rid of the whole exercise entirely. What are the motivations for an institution to do this?
I think it's a kind
we
of
know, everyone knows.
It's money. Come on, it's got to be money, right? It's always money.
It's money.
So
Okay,
it's not
money.
just that. Is it also legitimacy and credibility? and
Prestige, esteem, I mean, if you're the only art school that doesn't put something in the ref, then your absence says more than your presence, even if you score badly. Yeah.
So but I think that persuading people who see themselves as artists that, actually you're a researcher now, that is difficult, because I imagine that it would be quite nice and you'd be very happy with that description of yourself as an artist if you spend your life doing art, and then people saying, no, you got to be a researcher. And especially, and this would make it much, much harder if they say you've got to be a researcher and you've got to write papers about your art now, because that's the only thing that's submittable. So this push for NTO submissions is key, I think, to making it the ref more acceptable to people like artists.
But do you think sometimes that we do art a injustice here by saying, artists therefore have to be researchers, and that's really difficult? And we've gotten in our mind when we say that artists are some, living in a park with like daisy chains and skipping through. Whereas art itself, the whole idea about creative type, but art can be an extremely rigorous, extremely competitive,
absolutely, yes,
extremely like cutthroat, like, but we don't think about it, do we? We think of research being extremely competitive and cutthroat, but actually art is not that dissimilar. So getting them to compete in research terms, maybe they're better prepared than they think they are. I certainly think so. If you can survive in the world of art, I think you can survive anywhere. So the ref should be peanuts.
If you've ever been setting
I really hope that they brilliantly well. And I think they've got an amazing team on board to do it. And all the enthusiasm and energy you need for it.
And I think the key thing that came out right at the end of the interview, and they were saying about actually engaging with the ref means that we can drive forward research culture if you can get everybody enthused in it. But they were talking about the inevitable problems of engaging people with a bureaucratic university nationwide process. But I think that's key, and that's something that we share with them very strongly. If we can get everybody involved in the ref, we can get it pushed in the right direction. It has this incredible impact on research culture and the way that research is done, and people are rewarded, and all manner of other really huge beneficial effects for the country, regardless of whether you're an artist, a researcher, or anything else. So I think that came out very strongly, and I was very happy with our visit there, and with their views on the ref and what it's like to be a first-time refer.
Yeah, just use it as
a ref virgin. A ref virgin. That's amazing. They're not the only ones. Can I just say there are a number of newcomers to Ref 2029, and this is only one example. If you are a newcomer to Ref 2029 and you want to talk about your processes or lack thereof, or how you're preparing, drop us a line in the comments and we'll be in touch. It'd be really interesting to talk to you, not only because Ref 2029 is so different, but also because, Ref 2029 is a test bed for, Ref 2030X. So it'll be really interesting to see how we can prepare for the future.
Gemma's phrase du jour. Ref 30X.
Not my phrase, but it is a phrase that I have heard and I've adopted, and it is true. The Ref 2029 is a live lab. It's a live experiment for the future of research assessment, which we're already starting to discuss now. And when we talk about the future of research assessment, we're talking about Ref 2030X or Ref 2030Y, because there might be two within the 30s. But yeah, that is. I don't think the ref is going anywhere. I think the ref in its current form might be going somewhere, but it'd be really interesting to see what form it will take further. So we're using 2029 as a way of making sure it's better in the future. And I think it can be better. It can be a lot worse, but it can be a lot better as well. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on this amazing post-World Cup Viva la Roja What the Ref exercise. If you have any comments, please drop them in the comments below. And if you have any questions or you have anything we'd like to hear from us or you'd like to hear us discuss about, please do drop us a line at wtref@hidden-ref.org. And you can get this and every other podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So until then, thanks so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.